Welcome everybody, and this is another one in my series of webinars about different sort of psychological phenomena or issues that may interfere with our ability to live a more fulfilling life, live a life that aligns more to our values, to fulfill our goals. Because there are so many cognitive biases that we hold and sort of cognitive flaws that we often have as humans, which can interrupt our best laid plans, if that makes sense. Tonight's webinar is about procrastination. You'll have to forgive me if I'm look a bit teary. I've got terrible hay fever today, so I might be a bit sort of red and puffy, so I apologise for that. So tonight's webinar is about procrastination. Oh gosh, look at me. And procrastination is something I particularly suffer from myself. It means that I put off doing things that would be better for me. I'll often do lots of other stuff too. I'm a very busy person. It's not that I'm not busy or that I'm lazing around, but I do put off doing things that are in my best interests, and do things that are less important, as it were, as a distraction from the big thing that I should be doing. So procrastination, but most people experience it in one area of their life or another. Some people procrastinate their health. That's something I do. I put off things like dietary change, physical activity, and things like that. They're things I want to do, but they're often things that I put off doing. It's not that they're not goals. It's that they're goals that I'm doing nothing about in the present moment. But in my mind, I am thinking that that is a goal that my future self will achieve. And I suppose the kind of language that I often use is about our kind of present self and our future self. Our present self in the here and now. Me right now today is a bit of a hedonist. And in the here and now, we often are hedonists. We are, I think we mentioned it in the last webinar, we kind of pursue sort of shorter term goals or shorter term activities that might be a little bit rewarding. But they often undermine a bigger goal that we would have achieved if we'd denied ourselves that short-term pleasure. So, for instance, there's no way I'm going to lose weight unless day by day I, day by day I do something about eating healthier and moving more, particularly the eating healthier bit. I simply will not achieve any weight loss unless every single day or many days of my life, I do something about eating healthily and something about being more active. So every day that goes by that I don't do it, I'm putting off starting. And I think the reason that this comes up in Club Soda is because we can put off starting to stop drinking, or we can put off starting to cut down drinking for week after week, year after year. We can hold the intention of wanting to do it at the same time as not doing it. And I think that's the challenge of being in this sort of behaviour change business, because it's not about not wanting it enough necessarily, or not really wanting it at all. It's nothing to do with, in many cases, not actually really desiring things to be different and desiring change. That's often there. But it's the putting off starting the change that is problematic. I meet many clients in my line of work who are, passionately interested in changing themselves, reducing or stopping the drug use, reducing or stopping the drinking. And I genuinely believe they are passionate about doing it, that they are aware that doing so would be better for them in the long term. They're aware of maybe the negative side of continuing along their current line of behaviour. They're not deluded about that. They are are very interested in change, but yet they're postponing that change week after week, year after year. The problem with change is we run out of runway in which to change, because our lives actually just end. That's an inevitability, and we will run out of time to implement all of these changes that we're really holding in our heads as changes we want to make. So I think that, let me just turn off my phone because it's pinging, and I think it might be because I'm still logged into the chat on my phone as well. So we want to change, we passionately want to change, we've got lots of good reasons to change, we know it would be better for us in the long run if we change, and yet we don't do anything about it in the here and now, because in the here and now we would like to just sort of maintain the status quo, be kind of comfortable, not have to make too much effort. Again, it goes back to discomfort tolerance, doesn't it? Not being a discomfort dodger. If we want to feel comfortable tonight, for example, I might want to finish this webinar and then just, I don't know, order a curry to arrive soon after this finishes, flop on the sofa, wait for Handmaid's Tale to come on, watch that and flop into bed. And I would deserve that because I've had a really great webinar with the Great Club Soda people, because it's Sunday, because it's work tomorrow, etc., etc. There's lots of reasons why I could talk myself into not doing anything healthy this evening after this webinar. But that would mean that tomorrow I still haven't started to change. The important thing about change is just beginning to do it. And I think that that would involve usually much smaller steps than we maybe think we should be making, but just doing something each day that is about change rather than doing nothing. One of my colleagues and I, we run a group on sort of people being more moderate drinkers, and we, at the end of each of our groups, because it's a closed group, so at the end of the 6 sessions that we do, we have this sort of activity where we've got a whole bunch of sort of quotes and inspirational quotes and affirmations. We've been collecting them over the years. There's probably 150 of them, all printed out on A4 in colour, and we ask people to pick 1 or 2 of the quotes or affirmations that are most useful for them, and then they tell each other why they're most useful, and they get to take them home and put them on the fridge and all that kind of thing. And one of the ones that people pick out time and time again, and it's one of my favourites because it's about anti-procrastination, it just says something along the lines of, do something today that your future self will thank you for. Because what we keep doing is we defer all of the change in our life to our future self. Our future self will eat healthily. Our future self will go to the gym. Our future self will not drink in the week or will give up alcohol completely. Our future self will give up smoking. Our future self will apply for another job. Our future self will, write a book, learn an instrument. And these are all goals that we are holding now. Our actual present self is sort of fantasizing about these goals, but it's letting our future self enact them all. And then every day that comes along where we become our future self, we just decide not to do it that day and postpone it yet again for our future self to do. So something to think about is doing something right now. What will future me be really happy with me doing today? And by future me, I mean just me in the morning. I don't mean me in 10 years. That would be great too. But me tomorrow, what will future you thank you for in the morning? And what will it kind of roll its eyes at you for doing? My future me tomorrow is probably going to be happy that I drank lots of water today. My future me is going to be happy if I get a reasonably early night today. My future me is going to be delighted that I ate a healthy evening meal this evening as well. I'll wake up in the morning and that me will be grateful for yesterday me and everything I did. So we have this strange, I don't know if it's capacity. It's been measured. I'll link to the book. It's quite a heavy read, but it's quite interesting if you're into this stuff. There's sort of research that says something along the lines of, if you ask people, you know, how concerned they are about a stranger versus their future, like future self, you know, 10 years, 20 years from now, they don't kind of have much more concern for their own self in 20 years' time than they do for someone, you know, who's a stranger or who isn't them. And it seems to be that it's so far in the distance that we don't have a connection to our future self. And maybe that puts us off making changes in the here and now, that 20-year, you know, in the future version of ourselves will benefit from. And excuse me. And I do think that when it comes to behavior change, we are constantly fighting our predilection, I suppose, or our preference for the shorter term comforts. And the longer term gains usually involve a lot more effort and they happen over time. You don't get the reward that quickly. You don't see weight loss quickly, do you? If you're doing it right, it's quite slow. You may start to reap some of the rewards of it sooner, like maybe skin's a bit clearer if you eat healthily, or you know, maybe you start to sleep a bit better. But for much behavior change, we don't necessarily reap the rewards or see the benefits straight away. So we're not getting necessarily a lot of payback for the change, or we're having to wait a long time to see the payback. If we're thinking about things like weight loss, for example, again, because it's something that, you know, you have to do consciously and consistently day after day to eventually have an effect. I often say to another group I run, and we say, if you've got on, you're only allowed to weigh yourself once a year. If you could only get, every human in the world could only get on the scales on the 1st of January. That was the only day humans were allowed to weigh themselves. So you got on the scales on January the 1st, 2018, and you weighed, I don't know, let's say 14 stone. And then you got on the scales on January the 1st, 2019, the next time you were allowed to weigh yourself, and you weighed 13 stone. And you'd been eating healthily during the year, but it just, you know, it'd just been Christmas as well, but you'd been eating healthily during the year, and you'd lost a stone. I always say to people, would you be happy or sad that you lost a stone? They'd obviously always be happy. But actually to lose that stone across a year, for anyone who's not in the UK, that's 14 pounds. Then you may actually lose something along the lines of £1/4 pound a week, maybe even less. I can't do the maths. And when you're using regular kind of, you know, scales that we use in our homes, you probably wouldn't even notice a shift some days on that £1/4 pound. It wouldn't move the needle at all. I suppose we're digital now. But if you were just going by how much change had happened each day, it could be very quickly become disheartening. And actually that is precisely what happens to most people who are trying to lose a reasonably large amount of weight, is that £1/4 pound a day or £1 a week, which, you know, it would be less than £1 a month, wouldn't it, to lose a stone in a year, or just £1 and a bit a month. You know, that would be too slow for somebody, and they'd give up because they'd think all of this change that I'm making just for that loss. And as a result, people abandon their attempt. But by the end of the year, if they carried on, they'd have lost a stone. And if they did the same again another year, it would be 2, and another it would be 3. And then in 5 years' time, they'd be standing there just being so chuffed with themselves that they did it, and so pleased that they got to their goal. But all along the way, that person is having to make choices that maybe aren't giving them comfort in the here and now, and focus on that long-term goal. And I think with behaviour change, that is the big challenge, that the change often is very slow and we're not feeling rewarded. What I would say for most of my clients around drugs and alcohol is that that's one of the advantages of those types of changes, is that they're often felt quite quickly. Things like sleep, things like clearer skin, things like improved bowel movements, bladder control, various feelings of energy, not feeling ashamed of themselves in the morning. Lots of those changes actually happen pretty quickly when people reduce or stop drinking. And I think that's a great thing about that type of behaviour change, is that you can notice the benefits quite quickly, and often see them, and they're visible to others too. But that's not to mean that one can't struggle with making that change, or wrestle with wanting to be comfortable in the here and now, rather than, you know, use lots of self-control in order to resist any urges. So when we're thinking about making a big change, I think it's important sorry, God, it's bloody hay fever. It's important to think, well, what do I want my future self, my 1 month from now, my 6 months from now, my 1 year from now? What do I want that person, that me, to be thinking and feeling and doing? What do I want them to be experiencing? What do I want other people to notice about that version of myself? And can I live my life today in a way that will almost reveal that self when the time comes? Can I make changes today that will mean in a month's time I am that version of me, or in 6 months or a year I am closer to that version of myself? Because certainly if we do absolutely nothing, if we're completely and utterly inactive about change, we definitely 100% are guaranteed we won't be that version of ourselves. That's the one thing we do know. If I don't do anything about my weight, I will never lose weight. That's it. You know, there's no maybe about it. It's definitely not going to happen. In 6 months' time, I'll be precisely where I'm at now, if not, you know, bigger or heavier or whatever. So I think that, you know, the one thing we do know about doing nothing is that if we do nothing, absolutely nothing will change in our lives. And if we're not happy with some things in our lives now, then we're going to be not happy about them in 6 months' time, quite possibly. Unless we decide to do loads and loads of work on ourselves around self-acceptance, and we choose to accept ourselves the way we are, that's also fine if that's a genuine aim for ourselves. I think that the form of therapy that I practice, as I've told you about before, rational emotive therapy, it almost allows people to practice unconditional self-acceptance. So I accept myself despite my flaws, which I am aware of, and I accept others despite their flaws, and I accept life despite some of the flaws of life, some of its inconveniences and injustices and things like that. So if I can unconditionally accept myself as I am now, I can also still want to better myself in various ways. I don't see self-acceptance as a get out of jail free card. That's not what I would advocate for people who want to change. But it's to not beat ourselves up about where we're at now, and accept ourselves with our flaws, and still really work hard and strive hard in the direction of change and towards our goals, and to live out our values. And if we practice self-acceptance, it can kind of keep us going when we struggle with that change. But it can also be a catalyst, I think. Accepting ourselves the way we are, whilst knowing we actually want to change, can be a catalyst for change, because we're not sort of wrestling with things like guilt and shame anymore, which can actually keep us trapped, I think, trapped in not changing. And we can also then be compassionate about ourselves when change is difficult, when it isn't always consistent, when it's slower than we would like. When other people don't recognise what we're trying to do, we can unconditionally accept them despite their flaws too. One of the other things that a practitioner who I very, very much admire describes about procrastination is that sometimes when we procrastinate, when we put off doing something, what we're actually doing is an avoidant behavior. We are avoiding some kind of risk that might be inherent in trying that thing. So, for example, I have got lots of ideas for journal articles, some of which are half written, some of which are 3/4 written, some of which are just embryos of an idea. And I could have actually finished several of them in the past year, for absolute sure. I'm a hard worker. I spend a lot of time doing all sorts of stuff at weekends and evenings and things. So I'm not lazy, but I have not really made any effort to pick up and finish those articles. And I've been doing some work on myself, as a good psychologist should. And I think the reason I'm putting off doing it, it's still on my to-do list, but the reason I'm putting off doing it is because if I do it, I know that I'll experience self-doubt. I will experience difficulty in doing it, the writing. Some of the writing's kind of tough kind of stuff I need to write. I'm risking rejection because you send this stuff to journal editors and they can reject you outright or make loads of really snidey comments and suggest so many changes. It's a completely different thing. And in a sense, I'm avoiding experiencing those things by not actually sitting down to write, because I know it will be hard. I know it will sometimes make me feel stupid and like an imposter, and there'll be self-doubt, and I'm opening myself up to criticism from my peers and things like that. So actually in that instance, procrastinating doing it, because it's not that I'm just being lazy, I'm doing other stuff. I'm busying myself with other stuff that's less important probably in many cases. And that's one sort of, if you like, formulation or explanation for why people procrastinate. It's a not doing something because doing it will potentially create a new scenario where we might experience negative emotions or feedback or what have you. So sometimes I think we can put off change because we're afraid to fail, maybe because we sometimes sort of don't want all eyes on us when telling people we're doing it and things like that. People put off change so that they don't find out whether they're capable of doing it. That way they never have to struggle or be disappointed or explain to people or let people down or whatever. So I'm not sure what people think about that kind of, if you like, model of procrastination as we don't start something because we don't want to find out whether we can do it or whether we could be successful. Certainly think with some things in my life that's at play. That's why I don't do certain stuff. It's come up for me in work as well before. When you can do a job really, really well, but maybe you're staying a pay grade down or something because you can do that job really, really well and you can get all the positive feels from doing that really well. But you could actually push yourself into a promotion, but then you may be encountering situations you've not dealt with before and not doing such a brilliant job and making mistakes sometimes and not being a font of all knowledge about something and having to learn from others. So I think also in workplaces in the past, I've sort of sabotaged my own progress by holding back, so that I can still feel good about myself by being really, really competent at a lower level, and rather than risk finding out that I'm average or incompetent or that I've got loads to learn at a higher level. So yeah, there's different things holding us back, maybe from different types of change. I certainly think that with sort of health behavior change, and I put drinking into that category for many people. I don't necessarily put it into an addictions category for lots of people. I think, when people have physical alcohol dependency, there's a physical addiction there and a need to satisfy that dependency. But for many people, then they never got to physical dependency, and it's a bad health habit they've got, along with other things like, being inactive and, eating unhealthy foods and things like that. So when I talk about behaviour change, I think of alcohol in there along with lots of other stuff. And I think one of the kind of factors of procrastinating that kind of change is more around this idea that, oh, by the way, this is me, oh, which way do I go? Me procrastinating means I arrange those books in like a rainbow colour rather than doing something more meaningful towards my career. So, and the sock drawer's pretty tidy too most of the time. But that aside, I think, yeah, with health behaviour change, I think the reason people often put off change is because they definitely want it, but they want their future self to do it all. They don't really want their present self to have to do the change. Their present self just is like a monkey that just wants a tickle and it wants a banana, and it just wants what it wants. It wants pleasure. It's a hedonist, but also it's got long-term rational thinking, and also knows that it would be better to not just sit there having a tickle and eating bananas, but to actually get on and do some other more meaningful stuff. But mañana, mañana. So I'll do it tomorrow. E.g., my future self will do that. Future me will be healthy. Future me will be productive. Future me will start going to bed at 10 o'clock. Future me will, learn the piano, for instance. But present me just wants to have a tickle and eat a banana. And that with behaviour change, I think that's definitely one of the things that keeps people stuck in not changing, is that every day that we wake up, we become that hedonist again quite often. And we keep deferring the change to, future me. Keep deferring it. And the sad thing about many health behaviour changes is that by not making them, our quality of life for our life often gets worse and worse with each passing year. Various health things like eating healthy or gaining weight, or smoking, or drinking heavily. The damage only serves to make each passing year worse. So there isn't even really this kind of status quo that we're protecting anymore. Life is getting worse, and we still haven't changed, but we're still waiting for future me to do all of that change. So that's just the kind of, I suppose, the scary thing and the sad thing about not changing, is that we then just have run out of time to do it. We could have done it all, or done much of it, and we just ran out of time, which is the sort of the motivation to start doing something right now. I think also that I don't mean to be scary, by the way, by talking like that. And I know that in my line of work, I maybe see, I do see lives ending sooner than by rights they should have done, under any other circumstances, because of abuse, drink or drugs abuse, long term as well. And that lots of the people whose lives have ended still wanted to change and spoke about change. So I think it's just a very sad fact that we can want to change and we can very, very much struggle to change at the same time, and not feel ready to do it. It's why I use a lot of motivational interviewing in my work, because that specifically sort of helps people identify that this ambivalence, this discrepancy between what they're currently doing and what they'd like to be doing, and also that recognizes and accepts that people can be ambivalent about change. They can both want to change, but also because it would be good, but also not want to change because it will be hard. And the sooner we accept that we hold both of those kinds of thoughts, the better, really, because then we can actually get to the crux of the matter. And I think there's a technique called the decisional balance sheet, which some of you may have heard of or experienced or done before, and that's about looking at why it would be good to change, why it would be good to stay the same, why it would be hard to change, or the downsides of change, and also, you know, what the downsides are of staying the same. And you've got this kind of four window kind of setup. And actually that can be quite a good tool for yourself to just kind of go, okay, I want to change, but I'm wrestling with it. I need to be open and honest with myself about, you know, what I'm struggling with, what's keeping me here, what's keeping me from changing. You know, there may be things that the benefits that you get from it. You know, for many people, the benefits of drinking tonight, for example, are that they can relax, that they'll be sociable with somebody, that maybe it would cheer them up, that it's enjoyable, that it's something that's a habit they've always done, and it would be weird not to do it, for example. You know, it wouldn't necessarily be a hideous experience at the time. For many people, obviously drinking can be a hideous experience at the time, but often not straight away. The negative aspect is often the next day, isn't it? It's the consequences, and it's how one feels about oneself the following day. That's the downside of it. But you know, one shouldn't, when you're making decisions, ignore the fact that you must be getting something from a behaviour to be still doing it. So I quite like that kind of 4-window plan. The decisional balance sheet can be quite handy to just get it all out there. You know, what's good about staying the same? You know, what's good about it? What am I getting from it? And then what's bad about staying the same? You know, what don't I like about it? What's it holding me back from, etc. And you know, what would be hard about changing? You know, what would change be like? Would it be difficult? I might fail. My friends would put pressure on me. I don't know. My social life would change, etc. There are things that are difficult about change. And then also, what would be good about change? What would be beneficial about doing it? And then you've really got a much more complete picture. That the things that are difficult about change are often the things that we need to tackle and address and have plans for. Whilst we can focus on what's going to be great about it, like I said, sometimes what's great about it we don't experience straight away. That's something that will come. And that we are aiming towards, and that's why we're changing, so that the good stuff will come, but it may not come straight away. Meanwhile, we have to overcome and deal with and find solutions for the challenges of change, whether that is, you know, things around the social life, or whether that is stuff around self-doubt, or worrying that we're going to fail, or it causing arguments with our friends or our partner because they're not trying to change. You know, they're the kind of if you like, problem areas that we might want to look in more detail and come up with some strategies and solutions for. We can hold the good and the bad in our head. You know, drinking's bad because that's why I don't want to do it anymore, and not drinking will be good because, and that's why I want to do it, won't do it anymore. Meanwhile, we need to overcome the fact that sometimes drinking has felt pleasurable or given us something. That's why we've done it. So we need to find other ways of getting that. We need to find other ways, for instance, of relaxing, other ways, for instance, of getting to sleep at night. For many people, other ways of dealing with a bereavement, in my case, through entering into personal therapy. So there's lots of factors that we can sort of get our hands dirty with and start to wrestle with and look for solutions for. Sorry, sip of water, I'm afraid. Oh. So the other thing to think about is what it's going to be like, what it's always like the following day. I think there's something on the sober sprint, or one of those courses, there's an image that we created. It says something like, you know, I really regret not drinking last night, said no one ever, you know, or I really regret going to the gym after work, said no one ever, because they're not the things we regret. We don't wake up regretting doing something like that. Well, you know, maybe I'm I'm being too broad there, but pretty much without fail, people don't ever regret doing something in their best interests, such as not drinking or getting an early night or going to the gym or eating a healthy salad or whatever it might be, you know, writing a letter that's been on their to-do list for ages. You know, people don't typically say, I really regret doing that thing. What they do regret is not doing it or doing something unhealthy in its place. And they will wake up and say, I really regret drinking last night, or I really regret not going to the gym this evening after work. I'd have done it by now, you know, it'd be over by now, and I didn't go. So think about the things that you're most likely to regret and the things that you absolutely won't regret, and do more of the things you know you won't regret. I know that's easier said than done, of course. If that's what we did, behaviour change wouldn't be a whole big business, you know. Wouldn't need psychologists, and wouldn't need life coaches, and wouldn't need loads of self-help books, because we'd all be doing this thing because it would be so easy. So something to bear in something to bear in mind is doing more of what you won't regret and less of what you know you will regret. Something simple, little things that are paving the way for greater change that you won't necessarily see. It might not be visible to the naked eye for some time. You might not really notice until a month or 6 months down the line. You look back and you go, wow, I've come a long way. But each day that goes past, you may barely notice things. But if each day that goes past, you're doing things that are in your best interests. What is in your best interest? You know, going to bed at 10 o'clock tonight is in my best interest for me, for future me. Yeah, future me tomorrow will be delighted that I do that. And it will then, you know, be a domino effect tomorrow, because tomorrow will start much better. So then tomorrow I'll be able to do some of the other things that are on my to-do list, and I'll have more energy to do them well. And then tomorrow will be a slightly better day than it could have been otherwise. And then tomorrow I can try and do something else that's in my best interests, whether that's make a healthy choice for my breakfast or lunch, you know, walk 10,000 steps, something small that's in my best interests, rather than something that's kind of almost sabotaging my best interests and postponing my pursuit of my goals for yet another day. So I'm sorry, I've got such a tickly throat and eyes. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to speak for too much longer, I'm afraid. It's unlike me, isn't it? I need to get some antihistamines or something. But I'm wondering if anyone else on the live has got any sort of thoughts or questions about their own postponement of change, or their own experiences of not postponing change and finally getting round to doing it, and what that feels like. Because, you know, people do change. People often have those epiphanies, don't they? We often read about them. This happened, and then that was the day I turned my life around. However, lots of us don't have those epiphanies. And again, that's something that if we're waiting for one, we could wait our whole lives for and never have. So again, you know, there's different ways to starting change. And it may just be a really gradual drift. For some people, they just drift towards their change. There's no big epiphany. There's no pivotal moment where, you know, the rock bottom moment for some people, or that one comment they overhear someone make about them once in a changing room, or that one holiday photo that people talk about. You know, often people do have those moments, but let's assume we're never going to have one of those moments. Are we going to change anyway? Are we able to change without an epiphany, without a rock bottom, you know, without something pivotal happening? Could we just very simply, very humbly start to be different and move towards our pursuit of our goals? Could we just be more mindful, if you like, of our goals in our daily decisions, and just do it almost by stealth? Change by stealth, and that can sometimes take the pressure off as well, because we don't even have to say we're doing it necessarily, or disclose it quite so openly. If we're just gradually and slowly making decisions and making choices that serve our larger goals, and one day we'll be there, and we'd have achieved one of them, and it would have only been a result of very tiny, almost invisible to the naked eye, changes that we were making day by day. But the most important thing is to start doing something. It doesn't have to be big, just something that a better you would do, or the you that you would like to be would do. It doesn't even have to be all at once. You know, if you're not ready to, for instance, stop drinking, maybe you are ready to start going to bed earlier or something like that. You know, it's all about deciding that we can do something in our best interests each day, something positive in our best interests that moves us closer to where we want to be, rather than doing not one thing. So think about small stuff. And Neil's there saying that he approaches every situation thinking, why not? Why not do it? Yeah, or just do it. And I think that takes a lot of courage to go into a situation with that mindset. And I think some people can have more self-doubt. Why not would be, yeah, why not? But if I did, then this might happen, that might happen. And I think, and I think that, yeah, like Neil said again, we're capable of doing amazing things, but we do just have to begin. We will never change if we don't begin to change. But the beginning change doesn't have to be huge. It doesn't have to be monumental. It doesn't have to be noticeable to anyone else, but just something that is a change, that you know is a change. And you can just start clocking up little changes day by day. But the main big thing is you have to actually start. You will run out of time to do them, and your future you will have a shorter and shorter amount of time in which to achieve everything that you keep deferring to it, and future you at some point won't be able to do any of it. So please do think about small, tiny changes that are in the right direction that you want to head, and giving yourself permission to make them as small as you can manage, even whilst also holding the thought that you'd like to be doing more, but just doing something rather than nothing, beginning rather than postponing, rather than procrastinating. And on that note, I'm going to not procrastinate any longer taking an antihistamine, in case my throat closes up forever. And I'm sorry, I'm sorry I'm cutting it a little bit short, but it's been lovely to be meeting you all again, and those people who are new. And thank you for letting me talk through my tears and through my puffy eyes about procrastination and other related matters relating to our short-term hedonism. And anyway, don't be that monkey who just gets scratches and bananas. You know, be the one that starts fashioning tools out of flints and starts evolving. Yeah. And on that bombshell, I will bid you all adieu.